So today I would love to share with you a very easy, delicious, and healthy way to make pickles. So this is through a process called lacto-fermentation. Don't be scared of it. Last year, I tried making these last year and I followed a lot of YouTube videos, and finally I just read some books and I have it down to a science. But let me share with you what I did last year, and so hopefully you won't do the same thing. Last year, I don't know what was growing in some of these jars. I mean, it was just awful, and some of it was pretty scary. So this was an example of one. Some kind of mold was on it, and then all of my cucumbers were just falling apart to mush. It was just awful. I tried a lot of things with, peppers and cucumbers last year, and it was just terrible. Now, I did have a lot of batches where I had what's called a calm yeast growing on the top, and that's said to be pretty normal, but I even have it down to a science now where I don't even have that on top, and they're delicious. So what I'd like to do is share with you how you can do it too, especially if you're a home gardener. This is really easy because you can just do like 1 or 2 jars a day, whatever you have that you're picking out of your garden. This year I actually grew what I like to call a pickle tower using a GreenStalk system. If you missed that video, I will leave a link down below so that you can check it out. I harvested about 14 pounds of pickling cucumbers in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. Now, if you're harvesting your own cucumbers, make sure you're doing that in the early morning, not during the midday sun when they can be a little bit more soft, okay? Because we need to start packing them and within about 24 hours after we pick them, okay? Now, if you are buying your pickling cucumbers like I used to do, you will want to make sure when you're picking them out that they are wax and hopefully pesticide free, and you can tell that they're fresh if the skin is very sharp and it's not real smooth, like your bumps will be kind of spiky still. That'll tell you that they've been recently picked. We have a fabulous little farmers market here in western North Carolina. I would go over there to get my pickling cucumbers, and sure enough, they'd always say, oh, they were just picked this morning, but you could feel the cucumber and it was a little bit more smooth than it should be. But if you ever stumble on a little basket of them and they're spiky still, they were just picked that morning. But fortunately, as I mentioned, I was able to pick all of my own this year. So after you get your cucumbers, go ahead and put them in the crisper drawer of your refrigerator in a plastic bag until you are ready to begin processing them. You do want them to be a little bit chilled when you go to pack them in your jars. And then once you have your cucumbers, it's nice to think about what kind of spices you want to use. And of course, just the most basic for dill is a dill head, maybe some dill fronds, and some garlic cloves. But you can really make your own recipe. Make sure you put maybe a bay leaf in there too. Now, I have been experimenting with different recipes over the years, and I'd encourage you to do the same thing because that's what makes it fun, to make them your own. And here's an example of when my son and I were trying some, and I called them Pickles. And so here you go. You can check this out. Okay. All right, we're going to try some Pickles.
Yeah.
All right, let's try a couple of Pickles here. You put them in your bowl. These are going to be really strong. That's dill. Here, I'll take it.
Wait.
I used some of the green dill seed in here along with the dill. Sure. Huh. Ooh wee. I do not like those at all. Let's go get the other ones. We'll just throw these away.
I like the salty ones.
These are not good.
I like them.
Oh, no. They're terrible.
Okay. Thanks.
So for that particular recipe, I didn't like it, but my son loved it. I think he walked off with the whole bowl and devoured them in a minute. I used green dill seed, but I like to use the yellow flower heads. That's what I like. So that's why I encourage you to try different recipes and find out what you like or maybe what your family member likes. And you can pick the dill flower heads when they are just starting to open up to nice little delicate flowers, or pick your seed when it's starting to close up and getting a little bit more green. And then the little tiny baby flower heads are nice. Just cut above where some of the fronds are coming out, and another little head will pop out there. And then, of course, just some of the brown seed after it has matured. And then always, of course, the little dill fronds are great. You can find these at the grocery store a lot of times. I've seen some beautiful dill fronds at a place called Whole Foods before. So if you're not growing it, you can find it. Make sure you use a lot of the fronds, though, to really give it a good flavor, because there's a lot of flavor in the heads, but not always in the fronds. And then I just got a little bit of coriander out of the garden, too. This, of course, is just the seed for cilantro. And I had some bay leaves, so we want to get a couple of those because the tannins in bay leaves are said to keep your cucumbers crisp. Along with, I think I also read grape leaves. Now, don't wash your cucumbers until right before you're ready to prepare the pickles, okay? And when you wash your cucumbers, just use plain water. Don't put anything else in it to clean the cucumbers. Make sure you're using blemish-free cucumbers, no brown spots or anything like that. Use that for some fresh relish or something. Now, as I mentioned, I like to use the yellow dill heads, and that's when the flower's just starting to open up, and there's a lot of pollen in there. The pollen has a ton of flavor. As a matter of fact, I dry the pollen just to use in other dishes. Now, something else that likes the dill heads when they're yellow are insects. So what I do is I just take my little dill head, I turn it upside down in water, and just to drown any insects or anything that might be on there, but I don't run it under cold water or shake it around in the water, because that could dislodge the pollen granules, and that's what we want to give flavor to the dill pickles, okay? So just let them soak just to drown any insects. And you won't have to really do that as much if you have the green seed dill heads, okay? But make sure you do that if you have the yellow flowers. So let's get started, and you can do this ahead of time. I'm just going to make the brine here. Make sure you're using distilled water, and this brine is perfect for cucumbers and peppers. And then you'll want to use some natural sea salt. Don't use iodized sea salt, or I've used Himalayan pink salt, but that didn't do very well for me, but some people love it. I'm just telling you what I did to give me perfect pickles every time. And so again, natural sea salt, easy to find at your grocery store. And we need to measure this out. We're going to make 1 gallon of brine so that I can just use it on a continual basis as I harvest cucumbers from the garden. That's what makes this so easy. So you'll measure out about a half a cup plus 2 tablespoons. This will give you enough salt for 1 gallon. The amount of salt that you use here is very important. So I poured out a quart of the water and I warmed it up on the stove. You don't have to boil it, just enough to dissolve some salt. And then pour the salt in your quart jar, and then pour your water back in there. A quick stir and it should dissolve nicely. And now what we'll want to do is go ahead and add this back to the gallon of water, and that's going to give us 1 gallon of pickle brine. I like to mark it so I don't use it for something else. And so some of the equipment that we'll need, nothing really too special except for a couple of things. We'll need wide mouth mason jars along with the rims and the lids, and I like to sterilize my jars. I know some people don't do this, but I like to do it because I didn't do it last year. I'll just take some boiling water and pour it right into the jar till it overflows, because I put this in a bowl, and I'll let it sit for about 10 minutes, and that sterilizes it pretty well. I also just like to wear gloves because I'm always working out in the garden or in the kitchen and cleaning, and so it just protects my hands. And you'll need some removable Scotch tape, not the cheap stuff. Make sure you get removable Scotch tape, and then you need a Sharpie marker. And this is where you need a couple of other things. I have tried to ferment peppers and cucumbers without pickle pipes before and without weights. I did not have good results. I did have one or two jars that did fine, but I really tried to skimp and not buy these couple of little things, and I have had no problems this year, especially since I bought the weights. The weights made a big difference for me, and these are very easy to find on Amazon or online. I just bought the knockoff of the pickle pipes, and then I just bought two different kinds of glass weights. So when we start to put our pickles together, make sure your brine is at room temperature. It shouldn't be in the refrigerator. You don't want it cold, and you definitely don't want it warm. So this jar is cool, and I'm just going to add a few spices like some mustard seed, put some allspice berries in here with some black peppercorns and a couple of bay leaves, my dill heads of course, and some smashed garlic cloves. So now for our cucumbers, we'll just take off the stem end and the blossom end. And I like to use this little chopper here. I think it's called a crinkle cut chopper. You can also find these on Amazon, and it just gives, your pickles those little ridges. It makes them kind of neat, I think. So that's kind of fun. And then to our jar, let's go ahead and add in the cucumbers. And you don't want to press them down too hard because it might make them a little bit soft. And then just fill up your jar with some of the pickle brine. And now for the glass weight, which I also sterilized. This will keep your vegetables submerged under the water. And so now we'll push them down under the brine. You do not want your vegetables floating up. So just press it down gently just to remove any air bubbles in the jar. And if you happen to have some of the pickling spices floating on top, I like to remove those too. This was another batch of cucumbers I was doing. And then before we put our pickle pipe on, just dry off the rim real well, and on goes the pickle pipe. And then the rims, put them on nice and tight. And I put a little piece of Scotch tape on top of the pickle pipes and wrote down the date that I prepared the pickles. I also did this with whole cucumbers, and I made some spears too. So if you are practicing with your own recipe, just jot down what you put in the jar and then stick that on there with a piece of that removable tape, and you will know what you put in there if it turns out to be a really good batch of pickles, okay? And of course, compost all of your food scraps. So another very important part of your fermentation is placing your jars in a nice cool area that's a little bit dark. So this is perfect in my basement. The temperatures down there are around 65 degrees. So you really want to put it somewhere in between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And I know you'll be tempted to open up the jars and take a peek at them, but you don't need to. But there is one thing you should be looking for, and after about 2, maybe 3 days, if you slightly tilt your jars, you'll notice that there are a lot of carbon dioxide bubbles in the jar, and that is perfectly normal. That's what you want to see. That is just the lactobacillus organisms chomping away at the sugars and the starches in the vegetables, and it's creating lactic acid, and that's what's preserving your vegetables. And it has a great flavor. It's just a little bit different than acetic acid, which is what a lot of us are familiar with when we use vinegar. So another thing you'll notice is that the green will start to darken, and that's normal. On the right here is a freshly packed pickle jar. On the left is one that's about 7 days old. So you'll also notice that the brine will start to look cloudy. And when you open it, you might even see bubbles on the surface of the brine. And there may also be sediment on the bottom of the jar. That's all perfectly normal for this type of pickling. So I give mine about 7 days. Usually they have stopped bubbling a lot at this point. I may have just a little bit of bubbling still going on. And there you go. It is perfect. And they have been perfect time and time again, one after the other. And so just remove your glass plate, and you will have a wonderful flavor here. And you'll want to check and make sure that they are nice and crunchy and they're not soft. They are just wonderful. It has been working out so great. I think this is a perfect way for the home gardener to preserve their vegetables without heating up the kitchen in the summer. One other thing I need to mention is you will just replace the top with your regular lid, and I like to transfer that little piece of Scotch tape from the pickle pipe over to the new lid, and you'll store this in your refrigerator. I happen to have an extra refrigerator, which is perfect for this. So after you have moved them to the refrigerator for cold storage, you'll want to just check on them for about the next 3 or 4 days and just make sure that the gases are not building up in there, because they might still be fermenting a little bit. And so if you notice the lid is swelling, just loosen the ring and release those gases, and you can tighten it back. Now, I have stored mine up to 9 months. I was just using them all through the winter, and they were great. I think the flavor actually got better over time, but I've read some people like it only at about 2 months because of the texture of the vegetables. So you just be the judge of what you like. I just wanted to let you know that I've eaten mine well up to 9 months after I put them in the refrigerator. All right, thanks so much for watching. If y'all have any questions, please let me know, and have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.